The night in the Arabian desert was extraordinary. There was an eerie silence in the air, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for a magnificent moment. The streets of Makkah were drenched in darkness, but destiny was awake. The hour was near that had been preserved in scriptures for centuries, which the prophets had prophesied, and for whose arrival not only the earth but the heavens were waiting. On the morning of the year of the elephant, 12th Rabi al-Awwal, 570 CE, a child was born in the house of Amna bint Wahab, whom the world would come to know as Muhammad bin Abdullah Tana. At the time of birth, Amna saw a light that illuminated the east and the west. That same night, the fire temples of Persia were extinguished. The ramparts of the palace of Khazra fell, and it felt as if the foundations of falsehood had been shaken. This child was born an orphan. His father, Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib, had passed away before his birth. However, this orphancy was not a weakness. Rather, it was the first stage of special training by Allah Ta'ala. A few days later, according to Arab custom, the prophethood was handed over to the wet nurse Halima al-Sa'diyah of the Banu Sa'd tribe. It was a time of famine. Animals were weak, and milk was scarce. But in whichever house Muhammad set foot, blessings descended. Halima's animals were satiated, milk increased, and hardship turned into prosperity. During these days, the great event of Shaq al-Sadr, the opening of the chest, took place. Angels came, opened the prophet's tomb chest, washed his heart with Zamzam, and replaced it, as if announcing that this heart had been chosen for divine revelation. At the age of 6 years, the shadow of his mother was also lifted. Amna passed away on the return journey from Medina. This grief was deep, but the training of the Lord continued. His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, took the Prophet Sallallahu into his embrace. He held him extremely dear, even seating him on his special bed near the Kaaba and saying that this grandson of his possessed a great stature.
मेरे इस पोते की शान सबसे अजीम होगी
और वो दुनिया में सबसे ज्यादा अजमत वाला हुआ.
But the trials were not over yet. At the age of 8 years, his grandfather also passed away. Now, the guardianship was entrusted to his uncle, Abu Talib. Despite his poverty, Abu Talib preferred Muhammad over his own children, kept him along on every journey, and stood as a shield in every difficulty. From childhood, the Prophet was hard-working. He shepherded sheep, and later remarked that Allah Ta'ala made every prophet a shepherd so that they could learn leadership, patience, and kindness. As he entered youth, the people of Quraysh became enamored of his character. He never spoke a lie, never broke a promise, and never usurped anyone's right. People would entrust their most precious belongings to him without hesitation. Thus, the whole of Makkah began to know him by the names Al-Sadiq, the Truthful, and Al-Ameen, the Trustworthy. In his early youth, the Prophet ﷺ went on his first trade journey to Syria with his uncle Abu Talib. Near Basra, a Christian monk named Bahira saw extraordinary signs in him and warned Abu Talib to protect this child, as he was destined to achieve a great status in the future. This trip was brief, but it highlighted the dignity, seriousness, and natural wisdom of Muhammad. A few years later, Khadija bint Khuwaylid chose Muhammad to take her trade goods to Syria. This decision was not merely commercial, it was based on trust. During this journey, the Prophet's son presented a practical example of integrity, justice, and excellent fair dealing. Extraordinary profits were gained, but more than that, the fragrance of his character reached Makkah. Khadija was deeply impressed by his character. Eventually, they were married. This bond was not just a marital relationship. It became an example of peace, loyalty, and trust that remains radiant in history.
बहुत मुनाफे हुआ है.
Khadija stood behind Muhammad at every moment, becoming the support of his heart and the strength of his courage. Even after marriage, his life remained an embodiment of simplicity and integrity. In those days, an event occurred in Makkah that proved Muhammad was a champion of truth even before his prophethood. A trader from Yemen was looted by a powerful man of the Quraysh. He stood near the Kaaba and cried out for justice.
ऐ लोगों, मैं लुट गया हूँ, मेरी मदद करें.
But the silence of the Quraysh became a seal upon his oppression. This cry shook a few living consciences. Muhammad Khan was among them. Several tribes gathered at the house of Abdullah bin Judan and pledged that no oppressed person would be left alone in Mecca, regardless of their tribe. Everyone would unite against the oppressor. This treaty was called Hilf al-Fudul. Years later, even after prophethood, Rasulullah Ta'ala said that if he were called to such a treaty even today, he would certainly accept it. This was a declaration that the soul of Islam is justice and humanity. Time passed. When Muhammad T reached the age of 35 years, the stage for the reconstruction of the Kaaba arrived. Floods had damaged the walls. All tribes started the construction together, but as soon as the time came to place the Hajar Aswad, black stone, in its position, a severe dispute arose. Every tribe wanted this honor for themselves. Matters reached the point of swords being drawn, and the danger of bloodshed loomed. Finally, it was decided that the first person to enter the Haram the next morning would be the arbiter. When Muhammad Ta arrived the next morning, everyone said in one voice, "This is Al-Ameen." He spread a cloak, placed the Hajar Aswad on it, asked the chief of every tribe to hold a corner of the cloak, and then, with his own blessed hands, he installed the Hajar Aswad in its place. The dispute ended, and bloodshed was averted. This wisdom and leadership were a bright proof even before prophethood. After all these events, the heart of the Prophet ﷺ became increasingly restless due to the moral decline of Makkah. Idolatry, oppression, and injustice would not let him find peace. He began to prefer solitude. He would often go to the cave of Hira to spend time in reflection, prayer, and silence. This seclusion was not an escape. It was preparation for a monumental responsibility. Then the moment arrived when, at the age of 40 years, the silence of the cave of Hira was broken, and the first revelation was sent down. This was the turning point where the history of humanity took a new direction. These were the first 40 years of Rasul Akram, a complete, balanced, and pure life, which bears witness to the fact that prophethood was bestowed in a moment, but the foundation of character for it had been laid years before. Would you like me to highlight specific historical terms, or provide more context on any of the